Friends, fellow seekers of truth in the vast Star Wars saga, have you ever considered the quiet heroism? We often celebrate the explosive clashes, the galaxy-altering battles, the dramatic sacrifices made in the heat of conflict. We remember Luke staring down the Emperor, Leia's defiant spirit against the Death Star, and Obi-Wan's selfless duel with Vader. These are the moments etched in our collective memory, the operatic crescendos of a timeless tale. But what about the sacrifices unseen, the burdens carried in silence, day after relentless day? What if the truest measure of a Jedi's commitment wasn't in the blaze of glory, but in the unwavering endurance of a soul tested by constant adversity? Tonight, we turn our gaze to a figure whose heroism is often defined by his final act, a sacrifice etched in the very heart of the early rebellion, Kanan Jarrus. A Jedi Knight, survivor of the Purge, mentor to Ezra Bridger, and a vital pillar of the Ghost crew. We know him as a skilled warrior, a wise teacher, and a courageous leader. But beneath the surface of his stoic demeanor lies a tapestry of untold struggles, silent battles waged against fear, against the ghosts of his past, and against the ever-present threat of the Empire. We know the broad strokes of his story. Dume, the Padawan who witnessed the horrific betrayal of Order 66 and barely escaped with his life, thanks to the selfless act of his master, Depa Billaba. We know of his years spent in hiding, shedding his Jedi identity, living in the shadows, driven by the primal need to survive. We know of his reluctant return to the light, his mentorship of Ezra, and his crucial role in igniting the spark of rebellion in the Lothal sector. But what of the weight he carried during those long, dark years? What were the internal battles fought in the silence of his exile? How did the constant fear of discovery shape his character? What were the sacrifices he made, not in grand confrontations, but in the quiet, everyday act of denying his true self for the sake of survival? Think about it. To be a Jedi, a guardian of peace and justice, and then to be forced to abandon everything you believe in, to suppress the very essence of who you are, must have been a torment beyond measure. Imagine the constant vigilance, the paranoia, the gnawing fear that every shadow held an Imperial agent, every casual acquaintance a potential betrayer. This wasn't a momentary sacrifice. It was a daily erosion of his former life, a constant wearing down of his spirit. And then, when Ezra entered his life, Kanan was forced to confront his past once more. The decision to take on a Padawan was not made lightly. It was a profound responsibility, a conscious choice to re-expose himself to the very dangers he had spent years trying to evade. He had to not only teach Ezra the ways of the Force, but also grapple with his own incomplete training, his own lingering trauma from the Purge. He had to be a mentor while still battling the ghosts of his own shattered apprenticeship. Consider the emotional burden of guiding a young, headstrong Padawan while constantly fearing that the Empire would discover their existence. Every lesson, every training session, every mission carried the weight of potential annihilation. Kanan couldn't afford a single mistake, for the consequences would be catastrophic, not just for himself, but for Ezra and the burgeoning rebellion. Tonight, we seek to delve deeper into these untold struggles. We aim to explore the silent sacrifices that forged Kanan Jarrus into the unwavering spirit we came to admire. We will examine the emotional scars of Order 66, the constant pressure of living in hiding, and the immense responsibility of guiding a new generation of Force users in a galaxy teeming with peril. This isn't just about recounting his known story, it's about illuminating the unseen battles, the internal fortitude, the quiet heroism that defined his journey. It's about understanding that true strength isn't always loud and explosive. Sometimes it's the silent, persistent endurance of a soul carrying a heavy burden for the greater good. Join us as we unravel the mysteries surrounding Kanan Jarrus's untold struggles. Let us explore the depths of his commitment, the resilience of his spirit, and the profound sacrifices he made in the quiet corners of the galaxy. prepare to see the hero we thought we knew in a new light, to appreciate the true weight of his journey, and to understand that sometimes the greatest Jedi sacrifices are indeed the silent burdens carried day after day, forging an unwavering spirit that ultimately ignites the flames of hope. Tonight, we explore the untold story of Kanan Jarrus, a testament to the quiet power of enduring sacrifice. We turn our gaze to the harrowing origin of the hero we know as Kanan Jarrus, a story of profound loss, agonizing isolation, and the unyielding burden that would forge his unwavering spirit. This is the tale of the Last Padawan. The Last Padawan, the weight of the Purge. We often recall Order 66 as a moment of galaxy-wide cataclysm, a single, devastating blow that extinguished the light of the Jedi. But for young Caleb Dume, it was not a grand event. It was an intimate, bloody betrayal. He was a boy, no more than a young man, standing on a battlefield with his master, Depa Billaba. They were Jedi, and their companions, the clone troopers, were their brothers in arms. Then, in an instant, everything changed. The order: execute. Order 66 was a whispered sentence that tore a hole in his reality, turning his loyal allies into relentless, murderous hunters. Picture the scene. The flash of blaster bolts, the sickening thud of a fallen friend, and the cold, unseen eyes of those who had once sworn fealty to the Republic. For Caleb, this was a moment of profound trauma, a shattering of his belief in order and justice. He saw the very foundation of his life crumble before his eyes as his master, in a final act of selfless heroism, held off the clones just long enough for him to flee. This was not a moment of heroic defiance for Caleb. It was an act of raw survival, a frantic, terrified flight into the unknown. The philosophical ideal of the Jedi, the very principles of peace and enlightenment, were reduced to a desperate, primal scramble for life. At etched, Eliot wrote, "Between the idea and the reality falls the shadow." And for Caleb, the shadow of that betrayal would follow him for years. He was not just a survivor of a war, he was a witness to a genocide. A child burdened with the memory of the Jedi Order's last breaths. He was a boy who had to run not from an enemy army, but from a trusted friend, a terrifying paradox that would define his every choice from that moment forward. The Last Padawan, a life in the shadows. To survive, Caleb Dume had to die. He had to shed every visible and spiritual vestige of his identity as a Jedi Padawan. The Padawan braid, a sacred symbol of his commitment and lineage, was unceremoniously cut. The lightsaber, the elegant weapon of a civilized age, was abandoned. But the hardest sacrifice was the one he carried within, the constant, gnawing need to suppress his connection to the Force. He had to become small, unremarkable, a ghost in a galaxy teeming with life. He became Kanan Jarrus, a name without a history, a man without a home, a wanderer on the fringes. This was not a glorious exile. It was a life of quiet desperation, as Ovid wrote in his Metamorphoses. A transformation can be both a gift and a curse. For Kanan, the metamorphosis from Jedi to commoner was a grim necessity. He lived on the razor's edge, every flicker of emotion, every instinctive pull of the Force, a potential death sentence. He likely took on countless odd jobs, associating with smugglers, bounty hunters, and the kind of people who asked no questions. This wasn't just about hiding, it was about unlearning. He had to unlearn the posture of a guardian, the openness of a Jedi, the trust in a benevolent universe. The very essence of his being, a spirit attuned to the Force, had to be locked away in a prison of his own making. In this life on the fringes, he learned about the galaxy in a way the Jedi Order never could. He saw the suffering of ordinary people, the corruption of a triumphant empire, and the desperation that drove good people to do bad things. This period of his life, though dark, was a crucial part of his education, shaping his worldview and preparing him for the role he would eventually play. He became a man of the people, not a high-minded Jedi, and that would be his greatest strength. The Last Padawan, the weight of the fallen. The ghost of Depa Billaba, his master, haunted him. Her sacrifice was not a distant memory. It was a living, breathing part of him, a constant reminder of the life he owed her and the promise he was unable to keep. He was the one who survived, and with that survival came the gnawing guilt of the one who got away. Did he not fight hard enough? Could he have saved her? These are the questions that would plague him in the silence of his isolation. The silent battles waged in the privacy of his own mind. His guilt was a manifestation of survivor's remorse, a psychological weight as heavy as any physical burden. The death of his master was not just a historical event. It was a personal failure he had to live with every single day. His responsibility was not just to himself, but to the Jedi Order he was a part of, however briefly. He was a living remnant of a dead lineage, and with that came the unspoken duty to carry on its legacy. He held in his heart not only the memory of his fallen master, but the collective hope of an entire generation of Jedi who were violently cut down. It was a crushing burden, a shadow that he could never truly outrun. This period, the Last Padawan, was the crucible in which Kanan Jarrus was forged. The trauma of Order 66, the isolation of his exile, and the crushing guilt of his master's sacrifice all combined to shape him into the man he would become. He was not a Jedi in the traditional sense, but in his unwavering spirit, his quiet resilience, and his profound compassion, he embodied the very best of what a Jedi could be. His journey into the light would not begin until he faced the ghosts of his past and found the courage to carry the weight of his survival, not just for himself, but for a new generation that would need his guidance.